Samsaradava nalalita loka Pranaya karuna gana ganatvam
Samsaradava nalalita loka Pranaya
Praptasya kayana gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhyan Manasorasena
Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhyan Manasorasena
Romancha Kampa Shutaranga Vajo Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam
Romancha Kampa Shutaranga Vajo Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam
Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityananam Shingarathan Mandira Marjanado Yuktasya Bhaktam Stanyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam
Yuktasya Bhaktam Stanyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam
Chaturvida Shri Bhagavat Prasado Swadana Triptan Haribaksha Sangram Kritraiva Triptim Bhajata Sadaiva Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam Shri Radhika Madhavayorapara Madhurya Leela Gunarupa Namna Pratikshanasvadana Lolupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam Nikunjayo no rati keli sedhai Ya yali bir yukti rapekshaniya Tratidaksha Ativalavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Sakshadaritvena samasta shastre uktastatha bhayateva sadvir Kinto pravorya priya eva tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Yasya prashada Bhagavad prashado Yasya prashada Nagati kutopi Jayam stuvam stasa yasatri sadyam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda 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 Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine
Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Shri Krishna
Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna, Hare
Hare Hare,
Hare
Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama.
Rama Rama
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Ram,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram,
Jaya Radha, Nila Madhava Radha, Nila Madhava Radhe.
Radha, Nila Madhava Radha, Nila Madhava Radha.
Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Jai Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Sitaram, Jaya Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha, Lakshmi Narasingha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Jai Vishnupada Paramahansa Prabhajikacharya Sutara Sarasi Srimad His Divine Grace Abhojaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Pratishta Bhiviti Samstavakacharya Vaishnava Siramani Patita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Ji Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Guru Guru Varga Patita Udhari Ki Jai Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhakta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhakta Dasa Guna Sadhu Swami Prabhu Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai Ananta Kuri Vaishnava Vrindi Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Se Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai Jai Param Dayal Se Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai Prema Nama Sankirtane Ka Janaka Prema Purushottam Shri Sachinandan Shman Gauranga Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Gaur Hari Mahaprana Avatar Ki Jai Golokera Pramadhan Harinam Sankirtan Jaga Ki Jai Yoga Dharma Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai Brihat Nitanga Transcendental Bhakti Shri Vishnu Seva Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopina Radha Kund Syama Kund Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Braja Bhumi Vrindavan Mathura Dham Ki Jai The Lordship Shri Shri Radha Nilamadhava Ki Jai Shri Maya Purna Vadip Eka Chakradham Ki Jai Param Karuna Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai Shri Purushottam Ketra Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Shri Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu Smaspadra Devi Sudarshan Chakra Bhagavan Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Swami Snanan Yatra Mahotsava Ki Jai Shri Sitaram Lakshman Bhakta Hanuman Ji Ki Jai Bhakti Sarva Vigna Vinashana Karni Shingare Bhagavan Ki Jai Jaganga Mai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Maharani Vrindi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Shri Mathura Dharani Ki Jai Shamaveta Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai Nitai Gaurari Pramanandi Hari Bol. All glory to the assembly bodies. All glory to the assembly bodies. All glory to the assembly bodies. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru Shri Gauranga. Namaste Narasingaya. Namaste Narasingaya. Pralada da 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 Pralada da 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 Hiranyakasipu Vaksha Hiranyakasipu Vaksha Silatangkana Kalaye Jaya Silatangkana Kalaye Ito Nisinga Parato Nisinga Ito Nisinga Parato Nisinga Jato jato jamita tani singa Jaya Jata Jata Jamita Tani Singam Bairne Singam Rudayene Singam Bairne Singam Rudayene Singam Narasinghamademi Saranam Prapade Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Singam Dalita Hiranyakasipo Tanabhinga Kesavadeta Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Avakara Kamalavare Adbhuta Singam Dalita Hiranyakasipo Tanabhinga Kesavadita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Jaya Kesavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Kesavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Jai Jagadisha Re Jaya Nishingade Jaya Nishingade Nishingade Jaya Nishingade Jaya Narahari Jaya Narahari Narahari Jaya Narahari Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Prahlad Maharaj Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jai Shri Shri Bhakti Pada Sarvighnashana Kani Singari Bhagavan ki Jai Bhakta Shrishta Prahlad Maharaj ki Jai Lakshmi Nrsimhade Bhagavan ki Jai Nitai Gaurari Premanande Hari Hari Bo Dai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namo वृंदाये तुलसी विवाय प्रियाये केशव सत्या विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी सतवताय नमः। वृंदाये तुलसी देवाय प्रियाये केशव सत्या विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी सतवताय नमः। श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंदा देवी की जय।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी
राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो ए अभिलाषी।
राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो ए अभिलाषी।
राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो अभिलाषी।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
जे तुम्हारा शरण लो तारा पंच पूरा न हो।
जे तुम्हारा शरण लो तारा पंच पूर्णा।
कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी।
सेवा अधिकार दे वृंदावन वासी।
मोराए अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास।
मोरे विलास कुंज दियो वास।
नयने हरिवो सदा जुगल रूपरासी।
नयने रिव सदा जुगल रूपरासी।
एहि निवेदन धारो साखीर अनुगाता कोरो।
ए निवेदन सत्कार
सेवा अधिकारा दिए करो निज दासी
सेवा यारे करने जदासी
दीना कृष्णा दासे कोए जीना मोरा होए
ना कृष्ण दास कौन है मोरा
श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जीना भासी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा ये नवासी
श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जीना भासी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा ये नवासी
यानी कानी च पापानि ब्रह्मा हत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि पापानि ब्रह्महत्याधिकानि तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मा हत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि पापानि ब्रह्महत्याधिकानि तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मा हत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि पापानि ब्रह्महत्याधिकानि तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी
जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी
जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी
जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी
नित्याय गौरा हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्याय गौरा हरि बोल नित्याय गौरा हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्याय गौरा हरि बोल। श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंदा देवी की जय।
Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradi Devi Shatabhatai Namo. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradi Devi Shatabhatai Namo. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradi Devi Satavatai Namo. Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. The verdict shall to be his wishes fulfilled. Bestow mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire that you should give me a residence where the clothes of Vrindavan. That's within my vision, I will always hold you with the reference to Radha and Krishna. I dare you to make me a sort of captain of the bride. Please give me the privilege to do gospel service and make me your own man servant. It's very fallen and lowly service Krishna faith. May I always swing in love with Shri Radha. Shri Krishna Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Kampi. Shri Krishna Sankirtan. Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Ki Jai. Namo Mahabharanaya Krishna Prema Hare Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Gaura Krishna. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana. His cleanses the heart of the just like he made for years. And his language is the fire of conditioned life of the reputed birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because his prayers raise the benediction moment. It is the life of all which transcends to knowledge. It increases the earth, transcends to bliss, and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious, O my Lord. Your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds, millions of names like Krishna and Govind. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energy. There's no even hard and fast rule for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself Lord and strong straight,
One should be more tolerant
than
than
a tree,
devoid
devoid
of
of
all
sense of false prestige,
and should be ready to offer all respect to others.
in such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers.
I only want because of devotional service. O son of Maharaj Nanda, Krishna, I am your eternal servitor.
Yet some or other I'm fallen in this ocean of birth and death.
Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms of the lotus feet.
O my Lord, with my eyes you be decorated with tears of
love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name.
When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on the end of the recitation of your name? O Govind, feeling yourself fresh, I'm considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain,
and I'm
and I
feeling
feel
all
all
vacant
vacant in your world, in your absence.
I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he sunders me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya.
The art and offenses not chanting the holy name. They are as follows. 1.
The blasphemous devotees who dedicate their lives to propagating the holy names of the Lord.
2.
To consider names as demigods like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of Lord Vishnu.
3.
To disobey the orders of the spiritual master.
4.
To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literature pursuant to the Vedic version.
5.
To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna as imagination.
6.
To give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord.
7.
To commit sinful activities with respect to chanting the holy name of the Lord.
8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are permitted as spiritual activity, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the faithless person about the glories of holy name. And 10.
Do not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachment, even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our humble obeisances unto the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord.
They are just like desired trees, they can fulfill the desires of everyone,
and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakalpa Durabhyascha, Kipasindubhyavcha, Patanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Vaishnava Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Kantaraj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Janmadhyasya yato nivayadi taratas chartesva vigyasvara.
Janmadhyasya yatam vayaritaratas chartesva vigyasvara.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muyantiyat Surayaha.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Mujantija Suraya.
Tejo Varimadam Yata Vinimayo Yatratri Sarko Mesha.
Tejo Varimrida Jata Vinimayo Jatrat.
Dhamna Svenu Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
O my Lord Sri Krishna, O son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord Sri Krishna, O son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
offer my respectful obeisance unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because of the absolute
and the
truth
primeval cause of all
and the
causes,
primeval cause of all
of
causes,
the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there's no other cause beyond him.
And he's independent because there's no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
It is he who first imparted Vedic knowledge into the heart of Brahmaji,
the original living
the
being.
original being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations
As one is bewildered by the illusory representation
of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
of water in the fire, of land in the water.
Only because of him do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material universes,
temporarily manifested by reactions of the three modes of nature,
temporarily manifested by the reaction of three modes of nature,
appear factual although they are unreal.
appear factual, although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
who is eternal existence in transcendental abode,
which is forever free from the illusory representations in the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material world.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma projita kaichavutra,
Dhamma pujita kaitavutra,
paramo nimatsaranam satam,
brahmo nirmasharam,
vidyam vastavamatra vastu,
vidya vasavamastravastu,
shivedam tapatra mulanam,
Shivadam taputram,
Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Kute,
Shrimad Bhagavate Mamuni
Kim va Pare Ishvaraha,
Kim va Paridishvaraha,
Sadhya Hriti Avarudite Tra,
Sadhurudya Varidya
Kibihi Susubhistakshanat,
Kritivhi Shushuhistatna,
completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
completely rejecting all religious activities from material motives.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in
The
heart.
highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare
Such
of all.
truth uproots the threefold misery.
Such truth uproots threefold
This
miseries.
beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva,
This
in his
beautiful
maturity,
Bhagavatam compiled with great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity.
is sufficient in itself for God realization.
It's sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other
As
scripture?
soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
by this culture of knowledge,
by this culture of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme is established within
Nikama Kalpataror Galitam Phalam,
Nigama Kalpatoro Kalitam Phalam,
Kumukad Amrita Dravya Samyutam,
Sukamakhar Mrititrav Sangitam,
Vibhuta Bhagavatam Rasamalayam,
Vivata Bhagavatam Rasam,
Muhur Aho Raska Bhuvibhavakaha.
Mohur Horasika Bhuvivavaka.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam,
O expert and thoughtful man, really Shrimad
the
Bhagavatam,
mature fruit of the desired true Vedic literatures.
the mature fruit, the desired true Vedic
It
literature.
emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Shishukadev
Therefore,
Goswami.
this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice is already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was all relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shrivatam Svakrita Krishna,
Shrivatam Swakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Hiryantaksto Hi Bhadrani,
Vidyantasto Hyabhadrani, Virunoti
To hear
Suritsatam.
about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from the Vedic,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from it directly through the Bhagavad Gita.
is itself righteous activity.
It is self-righteous act.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
And for one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna dwelling within everyone's heart,
acts as a best wishing friend
acts as the best wishing,
and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies the devotee constantly engages in hearing.
Nasta presu abhadresu
Nasta preso bhadrishu,
nityam bhagavata sevaya
nityam bhagavata seva,
bhagavati utamasloke
bhagavati utamastu,
bhaktir bhavati naistaki.
nice.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, devotee naturally develops dormant transcendental knowledge.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam,
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
the devotees,
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotional service to the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tadarajastamo bhava
kamalobadayasche
kamalobhadayasya
cheta itaranavidam
chitaiteranavidam
sattve prasidhate.
sitam sattve prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes freed from the mode of passion and
and
ignorance.
thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
And thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manasu
Evam prasna manasu
bhagavat bhakti yogitaha
bhagavat bhakti yoga
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
bhagavat tattva
mukta sangasya jayate.
mukta sangha siddhaya.
When these impurities are wiped away,
When these impurities are wiped away,
when candidate becomes steady in state of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service,
becomes alive in devotional service,
and understands the science of God
and
perfectly.
understands the science of God completely.
Vidyate hridaya grantis,
Hridaya vidhanti
chidyante sarvasamsaya,
siddhyanti sarvasam
siyante jasya karmani,
siddhyanti sachakarmani.
krista evatmanishvare. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
This is Bhakti Yoga service the heart of the material affection
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enables to come at once to the service.
understanding of the supreme absolute truth personality of Godhead.
This is the supreme absolute personality of God.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness,
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand.
Shri Guru Vastika prayers. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on the forest fire to extinguish it.
The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on the forest fire just to extinguish it.
So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence.
So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence.
From my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet is such a spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities.
Offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lord of such a spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities.
Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments.
Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments.
The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu,
The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan moment of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu,
because he is always because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind.
because he's relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind.
Sometimes his hair stands on end.
Sometimes the bodily hair stand on
He
end.
feels quivering in his body,
He feels quivering in his
and
body,
tears flow from his eyes like waves.
and tears flow from his eyes like
Offer my
waves.
respectful obeisance to the lotus feet is such a spiritual master.
Offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus feet of such a spiritual
The
master.
spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna.
The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and
He
Krishna.
also engages his disciples in such worship.
He also engages disciples in such worship.
They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments,
They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments,
clean their temple,
clean the temple,
and perform other similar worship of the Lord.
and perform other similar worship of the
I
Lord.
offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
Spiritual master is always offering Krishna full kinds of delicious food,
The spiritual master is always offering all kind of delicious food.
analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked.
And that is as that which is licked, chewed, drunk,
When
and
the
sucked.
spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasada, he is satisfied.
When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasad, he is satisfied.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus feet of such a spiritual master.
The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava.
The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes Shri Radhika and
and their
Madhava,
qualities, names, and forms.
and about their qualities, names, and
The
forms.
spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment.
The Spiritual Master, aspire to relish these at every moment.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master.
The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting the gopis, who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs.
The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting the gopis, who in different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna conjugal loving affairs.
In the groves of Vrindavan,
Within the groves of
I
Vrindavan.
offer my most humble obeisances unto the Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master.
I offer my most humble obeisance unto the Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master.
The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servitor of the Lord.
Spiritual Master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servitor of the Lord.
This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities.
This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities.
Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hari Krishna.
Therefore, for my respectful obeisances unto Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master who is the bona fide representative of Sri Hari Krishna.
By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna.
By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna.
Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement.
Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement.
Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master.
Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master.
At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Feet of my spiritual master.
At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance to the Lotus Feet of my spiritual master.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 5, Text number 5. Atman Bhavaya Setani Napara Bhavayam Swayam Atmasaktim Avastabhya
Atma Shaktim Avastabhya
Uranabir Iva Klamaha.
Unanabhi Iva Klamaha.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. As the spider very easily creates the network of its cobweb and manifests its power of creation without being defeated by others, so also you yourself, by employment of your self-sufficient energy, create without any other's help. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The best example of self-sufficiency is the sun. The sun does not require to be illumined by any other body. Rather, it is the sun which helps all other illuminating agents. For in the presence of the sun, no other illuminating agent becomes prominent. Narada compared the position of Brahma to the self-sufficiency of the spider, who creates his own field of activities without any other's help by employment of its own energetic creation of saliva. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. As the spider very easily creates the network of its cobweb and manifests its power of creation without being defeated by others, so also you yourself, by employment of your self-sufficient energy, create without any other's help. This is Narada Muni speaking to Lord Brahma. And actually, self-sufficiency means being independent of material association for a devotee, and dependence on being independent of material association and being independent of dependence on mundane people and things, mundane things, but at the same time being completely dependent on the mercy of Lord Krishna. That's self-sufficiency for a devotee. The devotee is never independent of the mercy of the Lord, and nor does he ever think that he's independent of the Lord. But he is independent of dependence on material things and materialistic people. Well, this is further explained in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 6th chapter, 5th and 6th verses, where the dependence on Krishna is specific. And specific how? Well, it's explained. It says, for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. So this is 6th chapter, 6th verse. But Prabhupada says something very interesting in the purport. It says, the purpose of practicing eightfold yoga is to control the mind in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. Unless the mind is controlled, the practice of yoga for show is simply a waste of time. One who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy, and thus his mind and its mission are spoiled. The constitutional position of the living entity is to carry out the order of the superior. As long as one's mind remains an unconquered enemy, one has to serve the dictations of lust, anger, avarice or greed, illusion, madness, and envy. But when the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart of everyone as Paramatma. Real yoga practice entails meeting the Paramatma within the heart and then following his dictation. For one who takes to Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the Lord follows automatically. So, the self-sufficiency of the devotee is actually different than the self-sufficiency of the materialist. Because the devotee does not depend on mundane knowledge and mundane people. But he or she totally depends on the mercy of Krishna and his devotees. So, but however, perfect self-sufficiency, the best example of that is the sun. It doesn't depend on anything else for its energy, but yet the energy of the sun comes from the Lord. It's a reflection of the Brahmajyoti. But then the sun, under the guidance of Surya, disseminates that light and heat, energy all throughout the universe. But it doesn't depend on any other source than the spiritual effulgence emanating from the body of the Lord. So, thinking that one is independent of the Lord is actually Maya. It's the cause of entanglement in the material world. So, therefore, the next verse, number 7, goes even further. It says, for one who has conquered the mind, the supersoul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. On the purport, Prabhupada says, actually, every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. When the mind is misled by the external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Therefore, as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one should be considered to have already reached the destination. One has to abide by superior dictation. When one's mind is fixed on a superior nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. The mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of the Paramatma, or the Supersoul, because his transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is in because this transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is in Krishna consciousness, the devotee of the Lord is unaffected by the dualities of material existence, namely distress and happiness, cold and heat, etc. This state is practical samadhi, or absorption in the Supreme. So, in the previous verse, Prabhupada mentioned dictation of the personality of Godhead 4 times. 3 times. And then in the next verse, text 7, he mentions it 5 times. So this abiding by the dictation of the Lord is extremely important. Then a little bit later on, in the 18th chapter, Prabhupada says something more. That is, 18th chapter, verse number 58, where he says, if you become conscious of me, he's speaking to Arjuna, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. So in the purport, Prabhupada explains what it means to abide by the dictation of the Lord. He says, a person in full Krishna consciousness is not unduly anxious about executing the duties of his existence. The foolish cannot understand this great freedom from all anxiety. For one who acts in Krishna consciousness, Lord Krishna becomes the most intimate friend. He always looks after his friend's comfort, and he gives himself to his friend who is so devotedly engaged, working 24 hours a day to please the Lord. Therefore, no one should be carried away by the false ego of the bodily concept of life. One should not falsely think himself independent of the laws of material nature, or free to act. He is already under strict material laws, but as soon as he acts in Krishna consciousness, he is liberated, free from the material perplexities. One should note very carefully that one who is not active in Krishna consciousness is losing himself in the material whirlpool, in the ocean of birth and death. No conditioned soul actually knows what is to be done and what is not to be done. But a person who acts in Krishna consciousness is free to act because everything is prompted by Krishna from within and confirmed by the spiritual master without. So that within and without validation is extremely important. And accepting the dictation of the Lord also comes through the bona fide spiritual masters, Siksha and Diksha Gurus. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.7.5, it is said, within the super soul becomes spiritual master, and without he becomes spiritual master as scriptures, saints, and initiator spiritual master. So you have this within and without dictation coming from the Lord and his devotees and his scripture and his saints. So we are never, therefore, bereft of knowledge unless we decide not to hear, not to accept the dictation of the Lord, or the dictation of the bona fide spiritual masters, then we are completely in illusion, and everything we do will be a failure. There might be some temporary success, but later on it will be a complete failure. So the understanding of self-sufficiency of the materialist is different than the understanding of self-sufficiency for the devotee. The devotee is self-sufficient of all material influences, philosophies, so-called knowledge, and association of such people. But the devotee, on the other hand, is completely dependent on the mercy of the Lord. Whereas in the mundane sense, when people talk about someone being off the grid and self-sufficient, they're usually atheistic people, 95% of the time, and they don't take the dictation of the Lord or his devotees. They just make things up in their own mind of what they think should be the truth that they want to follow. Therefore, the non-devotee becomes entangled more and more, dependent more and more on material nature, whereas a devotee is completely, if he's following properly, completely free of that influence of material energy. And therefore, devotees attain what's called a blissful state, not disturbed by whatever happens, happiness, distress, success or failure, because they have complete faith in the Lord, who is their protector, their father, their mother, their everything. So this is the deep understanding of the devotee, by which one can go through life completely without being tainted by the material influence, and be able to think of Krishna at the moment of death and go back to Godhead. Okay, so Narada compared the position of Brahma to the self-sufficiency of the spider, who creates its own field of activities. That's called the spider web. And he stays on one corner of that spider web until some bug is caught and can't get free. And then he slowly comes to the consternation of the fly who's caught in the spider web, and then stings the fly, kills it, and then stores it by wrapping it up in its own saliva net, and then keeping it, preserving that tasty bit of fly for whenever it gets hungry. So that is the spider. But yet, it says, the spider who creates its own field of activities without any other's help by employment of its own energetic creation of saliva. So, the devotee is never independent of the Lord. If anything, a devotee is always dependent on the Lord, but free from bad association, bad knowledge, bad ideas, bad desires, etc. Okay, so we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? This was a short purport, but it has a lot of deep meaning. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.